People, oh, was I quiet? Or did y'all hear me? Oh, all right. Sorry, live people. We're back. So anyway, all I was saying was, so I was, so my son says, let's pray, right? And I'm sitting there, and a million different thoughts are going through my head. What am I going to write on? What am I going to write on? And Hunter says, let's pray. So immediately in that very moment, there is a power greater than me restoring me to sanity. The second step says that we came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. Right? So the crazy part is that when we come to understand that God will send people to be a power greater than ourselves that can restore us to sanity. Right? So last month I spoke on being powerless over others. How many were here last month when I spoke on step 1? How many of y'all? 3, 17, 20, 22. Sold. So anyway, I was struggling over being powerless over others, right? And honestly, I've been like kind of an emotional wreck over it and stressing myself out over situations that I have no power over. And then I have to sit there, and all of a sudden I'm watching my wife go through this situation, and she starts stressing, and she's, in this moment. So I start talking to her like, oh my goodness, why are you even focused on that? Just turn and look to God. You know what I mean? And all of a sudden, it hits me that I'm not even doing what I'm trying to tell her to do. I'm being distracted by everything else instead of focusing on God. So again, God put her in a situation as a power greater than me that could restore me to sanity, that he's like, hey, can you just look at me? Stop looking everywhere else and look right here. So I want to talk about chapter 14 in Matthew, verses 22 to 32. But I just want to talk about how often and how easy it is for all of us to become distracted, right? But Matthew chapter 14, verses 22 through 32 says, immediately Jesus made his disciples get into the boat and go before him to the other side, while he sent the multitudes away. And when he had sent the multitudes away, he went up on the mountain by himself to pray. This is why I'm a hunter. I like to go on the mountain by myself to pray. Now, when evening came, he was all alone there. But the boat was now in the middle of the sea, tossed by waves, for the wind was contrary. Now in the fourth watch of the night, Jesus went to them, walking on the sea. Right? This is when Jesus is walking on water. And the disciples see him walking on the sea. They were troubled, saying, it is a ghost. And they cried out for fear. But immediately Jesus spoke to them, saying, be of good cheer. It is I. Do not be afraid. And Peter answered him and said, Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water, right? He's making a demand to Jesus. Like, if it's you, then do this. How often if we ask Jesus to do something? Like, if you're really there, God, right? So Jesus says, come. And Peter goes down out of the boat. He walked on the water. He's walking on the water, right? To go to Jesus. But when he saw that the wind was boisterous, he was afraid and began sinking. He cried out, saying, Lord, save me. And immediately Jesus stretched out his hand and caught him and said to him, O you of little faith, why did you doubt? And when they got into the boat, the wind ceased. Right? Like, how many times have we done that? Like, demanded that God do something. He answers it. And then we turn our head from him and we no longer focus on him again, right? Lord, just get me out of jail today. I'll never do it again. We're walking on water out of the jail, running right back to the same thing. And now we're, oh my goodness, save me. And he reaches out and picks us up again. Right? How many times have we done that? We focus on everything around us. We get caught on the storm, right? The storm is, I just stubbed my toe. Oh my goodness, I need to go use. I stubbed my toe. And then we get caught up in these poor me, poor me, poor me another. Right? It's pretty easy to do, though, because we're certainly not alone. Because check this out. Abraham, right? Everybody know who Abraham is? It's at the very beginning of the Bible, all the descendants of the earth, right? So Abraham pleads with God because there's all these people who are living in America. I mean, Sodom and Gomorrah. See what I did there? Sodom and Gomorrah, right? And there's all these evil, and he's going to destroy the city. And Abraham's pleading with him, Lord, but if there's just one righteous, and he convinces them to finally save these people. And the Lord's like, okay, we'll do it. So he gives these Lot and his wife, they give them the way out. All they got to do is keep their eyes on the road ahead. Look to Jesus. Just keep walking, right? Just walk. And what does she do? She turns around and she turns into a pillar of salt. Takes her eyes off of God. You know what I'm saying? Then we look at Samson, right? Strongest man in the world. Next to me. In my good days. With a Snapchat filter on. But Samson, he's the strongest man in the world. As long as he keeps his eyes focused on the Lord, he will remain there. He gets distracted by a female. And that's his demise, right? We've got the Israelites who took their eyes off of God and got lost wandering in the wilderness for 40 years. Could you imagine getting lost in the wilderness for 40 years? Could you just turn your head for a second like, 40 years. It's like how my addiction started. I was wandering in the wilderness for 20 years. I decided to smoke a joint, and 20 years later, I'm a crackhead. I was lost in the wilderness. But my point is we all get lost when we take our eyes off of God. So I was opening up my teaching from last year because I wanted to get inspired. You know what I'm saying? And I was like, what can I do from last year's teaching? And I opened it. And there was a power greater than myself that restores me to sanity. Had nothing to do with what I was about to teach on. Last year, when I did this teaching, I was in a state, I don't know what it is about, I know that's not fun, because that's going to thaw out July 4th. We're going to get 22 days of summer, and then we are going to be in hoodies and sweatpants on August 3rd. But what I'm saying is, last year when I was doing this teaching, my daughter was in and out of the emergency room, nonstop. We found out she had anemia. She snapped her collarbone in half. My mother and I prayed last year, not 25, but 2024, on New Year's Eve, for her to be healed, to break some chains. And she ended up in the emergency room because she couldn't breathe. This is last year's message, right? So everything's falling apart around me. I had a sickness. I had the flu. It was terrible. I remember it stuck with me for weeks. I was really deep in life on life's terms. So after reading all that, I had to take a pause and look at my current state right now of life through another lens. Right? Because, the thing with addiction is we all just try to change our perception of reality rather than to change reality itself, right? We're like, you know what? We'll just negate the fact that we owe an electric bill that's $600 by smoking crack. It's no longer there. I don't even care about it because I got a candle. So I had to look at it from another angle, right? And instead of looking at the things that I'm powerless over, the things that I can't control, I needed to look at what's going on in my life currently. What is going on in my life currently? I have 3 kids that none of them are in the emergency room. They're all healthy. I know where they all are. One of them's putting up the words behind me. Well, was when I need them. I'll be calling on you, son. But I have 3 healthy children. Right? My mother is sitting in the crowd right now, not in the emergency room, but right here. My dad was in a panic because he couldn't afford this medication that they told him that he had to have. They had to have it, right? So he gets cut off, and he can't have it anymore. And guess what? His blood sugar is stabilized like never before. You know what I'm saying? Like, they told him to go on this medication. His blood sugar's over here. We're like riding the Viper on Darien Lake. And then we jumped over it all the way to the Superman off the same track. And now it's stabilized. I have just celebrated multiple years clean in January. My wife celebrated with me. I have a home that has heat on. If I take it back to 2011, I did not have a home with heat on. I have a driveway that I get mad about because there's too many vehicles in it. I'm mad that there's too many vehicles in my parking lot. Because my son drives, my daughter drives, I drive, my wife drives. I'm talking about real luxury problems. Like, who's upset that there's too many vehicles in their driveway? Like, did I forget where I came from when I was trying to walk to meetings in weather like this, or when I was trying to walk to the trap house so that I could just get one more? Right? I forgot where I came from for a moment. So reading that restored me to sanity real quick. So I decided that I even stepped on the scale today because I always go through this phase, right? And at the end of summer, it's like so hard to maintain a summer body, like at the age of 47. You know what I'm saying? So like, I was just like, weighed myself after Christmas, and I was like, babe, throw the scale away. But today, I have brought it down to almost 10 pounds underneath, right? So I'm going in the right direction. I'm 47 and I can still run on a treadmill. Like, I am so grateful that I can do that, right? It's not fun. I don't like to do it. But the fact that I can allows me to do it, so I make sure that I do it. But after realizing all that, I decided, what am I going to share on? What am I going to really speak on? I decided that I needed to go back to the very beginning. I need to share about the very beginning and remember what it was like to be in early recovery, right? Like, that's why I brought this wonderful little book, right? This is what your Bibles should look like, but this is the basic text from Narcotics Anonymous. As you can see, there's no more cover on it because this is how I introduced myself. And this is how I built my foundation, right? I was a student of the literature. And the first thing that I had to do when I got into recovery was what? You know? Right. Stop using drugs. It's the very first thing that I had to do. But when we do that, we begin to experience a full range of emotions that we aren't used to dealing with, right? We need to understand that we're human and that it's okay to be sad. It's okay to feel some anxiety. It's okay to feel some sort of anger. We don't have to run from these feelings anymore. In fact, we can embrace them and say, hey, I'm a human and God gave me these emotions. It's learning how to cope through them. Right? So sadly, we always want to hide from them emotions by running back to the same thing that gave us the emotions in the first place, right? We're like, hey, you know what? I'm feeling anxious, so I am going to smoke some crack because that'll take the anxiety right out of me. Meanwhile, I'm over here tweaking and peeking, feeling all sorts of craziness. I'm all sad because my girl broke up with me, so I'm going to go to the bar and get drunk. And then I'm up there singing some country song in karaoke. My dog's gone. I'm not going to do it to y'all. I won't do that today. But I'm talking about the insanity's definition is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results, right? Or in my case, it was doing the same thing over and over again, knowing the results and just doing it anyway. Right? That's true insanity. I mean, holy cow, like I know I'm going to go to jail. Let's go do that today. So tonight, we're going to talk about how there's no chemical solution to a spiritual problem. You're going to hear me talk about the literature. If I say the literature, it means I'm talking about the basic text. If I say the Bible and you don't know what that means, see me after. But we're going to talk about the basic text first. And I'm going to go to basic text, page 23. And it states that the first step leaves us with a need to believe in something that can help us with our powerlessness, uselessness, and helplessness. The first step leaves a vacuum in our lives. We need to find something to fill that void. This is the purpose of the second step. So first off, let's just grasp the fact that how many of us have ever felt powerless, helpless, useless? Right? Them are some pretty deep words when you think about that. We look for that void. How many have felt that hole, right? There's a hole that's just something's missing. You have that inner gnawing feeling, just that uneasy, settling feeling there. I think we've all honestly felt that. It doesn't matter if you've been in addiction or not. We've all felt that, right? The common denominator that many of us have is obsessive behavior. We try to fill ourselves up with something until we are satisfied, right? What do we turn to? Food, right? I be loving some food. You better not catch me during baseball season, because if you want to find me and you need to talk to me, just go to Harris's. I'm literally live there. I pay rent. Like, I got stock in their parfaits. That's where I live, you know? So food is one of them. We turn to sex, right? Like, we get clean, all of a sudden we feel lonely, and we're like, oh, I just met my man. He hugged me. He said, keep coming back. You know, we try to fill ourselves up by chasing that, you know? We try to dress up the outside by buying new clothes. You know, we think that because we feel like worthless on the inside, if we just dress it up, we'll be better, right? You ever put some nice clothes on a garbage can? Still a garbage can. Still messed up on the inside, right? But we try to do all this. I mean, some of us try to do it with tattoos. I never did that, though. Tattoos were not a thing for me. But we come to find out that we are never satisfied. Ever. There's nothing that we can do that will fill us up. Do you know that I've owned 3 boats since I bought my first one? I've upgraded every time. Then I just got a memory that 7 years ago I bought a new Nissan Rogue 4, right? Wasn't good enough. I needed a pickup truck. Then that pickup truck wasn't good enough, so I had to go get another new pickup truck. We're never satisfied. We always want the next thing, the next one. Luckily, I love you, baby. I'm not trading you in. Don't you worry. The basic text, however, goes on to say that the first thing we do is stop using drugs. But it says that after admitting to having a drug problem, many of us would not admit that we needed faith and sanity. Right? So in order to admit that we need sanity, we first need to admit that we're insane. You know what I mean? Like, how many can honestly be like, I'm insane? I mean, think about it. My wife turned in the Incredible Hulk when I spilled chocolate milk one day. She was like, a growl came out. It was like, we all hid. We ducked. 3 days later, we came out. We were like, she's not green. We're safe. But then we need to recognize that true faith is needed. It literally says faith in the literature, right? And it's needed. But yet we become scared to turn to God. We don't want to have that kind of faith, yet here we are putting all of our faith in the dope man, right? My man was like, actually, I was this guy, right? I'll just tell you what I did because I got in trouble for selling. So I'll just tell you what I did. I'll be like, yo, I'll be there in 20 minutes. 3 days later, I'm turning on a corner right now, still sitting on the couch. Really, I'm about to be there. Think about this. This is who we put our trust in. The same guy that's about to take some candle wax, mix it with this, put some baby laxative in your stuff. You know, we put faith in the bartender, right? Meanwhile, we're so drunk they're just adding water at this point. You know what I mean? Like, these are the things we do. This is faith that we have no problem with. But now we want to bring God into it. And we're scared. So it goes on to say that we put the drugs down, and at this point, we start to feel the pain of living life without drugs or anything to replace them. It is this pain that forces us to seek a power greater than ourselves. Now, we need to remember that there are certain rules when we seek a power greater than ourselves. First, we must remember that it must be loving, must be caring, it must be greater than you, and it can't be you. But if it must be greater than you, we have to immediately throw out the concept that we can pick a light bulb to be a power greater than you. This was literally a suggestion given in the rooms when I went there. They were like, you can literally get a light bulb. And I'm like, really? Give me that light bulb. Definitely not greater than me. I smashed it in less than, Then they're like, you can use a doorknob. Listen, I'd be fighting with a doorknob at my own house right now. I win every single time. My wife was laughing the other day because she's trying to open the door. She thought it was locked. It wasn't locked. Nonetheless, she still won. She was greater than the doorknob. She still beat it. It felt like it was locked. It wasn't locked. She got it open. I'm just saying, don't use a doorknob, right? We have to get to a real power that is greater than ourselves. So how do we start this process of finding that power? It's a process of coming to believe. And in order to come to believe, we must first start what? Coming. We have to keep coming. Okay? We must show up. Then we have to admit that there is a possibility that there is a power greater than ourselves. Right? We have to admit that there's probably something that is greater than ourselves. How did we get here? Then we admit that we need help from something that is greater than our addictions. The literature goes on to say that we can call it the group, we can call it the program, or we can call it God. Now, what we don't need to be is a rocket scientist to understand that the word God is in this literature 92 times. Just in this book alone does the word God come up. They also, when they say power greater than, they capitalize that. When they write higher power, they capitalize that. Why is that? Because they know that the goal of the 12 steps is to lead you to Jesus. They know that when they wrote it, that if they lowercased it, that they were going to try to turn you to Baal or some other god or a light bulb or a doorknob. So they capitalized it to try to lead you to Jesus. Right? So, I'm here to admit, though, because like I said, I'm bringing it back to the beginning, that when I started the process, that I bought into a God of your own understanding. Because I didn't want to believe in the God that I was brought up with. My God was an acronym. G-O-D. Gift of desperation. I came from a state of animal-like living. I was jobless. I was homeless. I was facing 16 years in prison. I was an embarrassment to my family. I was a burden to society. And I was completely lost. I didn't know how to shower. I didn't know how to bathe, brush my teeth. I didn't even really know how to socialize anymore. I was completely lost. So then I think about how the process started, right? Because they say in the beginning, using is fun, then it becomes a habit, and then it becomes necessary for us to survive. So after high school, I graduate. Whoop, whoop. I graduated. That's exciting, right? And I got some graduation money. I got a car. And what did I do? I left the state. I went to North Carolina. I bet you in North Carolina it's not negative 75 right now. But I decided to come back. Why? Because when I went to North Carolina, I got into drugs, right? I got into drugs that made me say, I can't feel my face. But when the drinking, the drugs, the women, and all of that went away, I was lost and alone and wanted to come back home. I came home, did what I had to do here, same story, end up moving to Las Vegas. They told me what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. They lied. I got married there. She came back with me. I was like, no, you were supposed to stay. Just kidding. Forgive me, Lord. Not her. Obviously not her. But needless to say, in Vegas, when the drugs ran out, the women were long gone. I was out of money. I reached out to my dad and said, can you help me get home? And he helped me get home. Now I'm going to refer to chapter 15 in Luke. And if you want to open a Bible, you can. It's in verses 11 through 20. But I'm just going to summarize a story for you real quick, okay? There's a young man who took an early inheritance. He left home. He was living what he thought was his best life, right? When the money was spent, the women were just a memory, and the high was long gone. He had to resort to slopping with pigs, right? He did this to earn like a meager living, basically just took a job feeding these pigs. And he became so hungry that as he fed these pigs, he desired to eat the pods that they ate, but nobody would give him any. He recognized in that moment that he might have a problem. And he started to think, and he thought about them home-cooked meals that he could have. And here he is, starving, looking at pigs with envy. Do you imagine looking at a pig that's eating, living his best life, and you are just envious of that pig? So he convinced himself to go home, and while he was still a long way off, his father saw him coming. Filled with love and compassion, he ran and embraced his son. So you can take away from this prodigal son story, right, that no matter how far, how deep in our mess we are, that our Father in heaven is always willing to embrace us and take us back, right? I mean, we always can convince ourselves, I'm too far gone. We can try to convince our friends, be like, listen, you can go get saved, but I'm too far gone. Right? We can try to send our kids, well, you should go to Sunday school, but I won't go to church. Have you ever been caught up in your sin or in your addiction and just for a moment had like a periodic jolt of reality, like that moment of clarity where you're like, man, I should not be living like this? You know, like you're sitting at the table, you're sitting at the bar, you're sitting at the edge of some bed of some stranger that you've never talked to because but in that moment, you're like, what am I doing? need to get home. Let's look at Luke chapter 15, verses 17 and 20. I'm just going to read this part of this story. And it says, when he came to himself, he said, right? When he came to himself, how many of my father's hired servants have bread enough to spare, and I perish with hunger? I will arise and go to my father and say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you, and I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired servants. And he arose and came to his father. But when he was still a great way off, his father saw him, had compassion, ran and fell on his neck and kissed him. Now, even the prodigal son had a moment of clarity, that periodic jolt of reality. It wasn't him that had the power to bring him back, though. It was a power greater than himself that restored him to sanity in that moment. So in the basic text, it says, after coming to NA, we realized we were sick people. Now, if you were at NA, they would be like, sick! They would chant it like big thing, and then they would be like, getting better. But what we need to realize is it says, what it is really is that after we come to our senses, or after a power greater than ourselves restores us to sanity, it is then that we realize we were sick people. Like, I'm not sure what lengths your addiction took you to, but I remember having my kids bang on my bathroom door because they were hungry and wanted breakfast, but it was more important for me to hit a vein than it was to feed my children. It shouldn't take me to come to any program to understand that I was sick for doing that, right? I don't know if you ever created an argument with your significant other just so that you had an excuse to leave so you could go be with another. That's sick, right? If any of you did that, you're sick. I walked. Amen. Preach, brother. I'm about to give you the mic. Staying up for multiple days in a row just to get high in a trap house that probably has cockroaches. Sick. Not brushing your teeth for days in a row and still going to make out with somebody. Sick. Not showering for weeks and still believing you're the man. Sick. But at the end of the road, when I had nothing and I was facing 16 years in prison, I lost custody of my kids, I was unemployable, and I was not in touch with my family. I wasn't on speaking terms. Knowing deep inside I created the mess, I still blamed God. Anybody been there? Right? Still blaming God for everything that we did. So when I came to the program, people were like talking about God and they mentioned it, well, the G word's in here 92 times. And I'm like, well, shut up, because you told me I can make it a light bulb. So let's talk about that real quick. But I would act the part, but I was hesitant, right? And I had the background of the church. My mom gave me a Bible in rehab, and I would read it here and there. But the truth is, I wasn't living for God. I wanted to make the God of my own understanding what I wanted it to be. But there was one thing that really stuck out, and people just kept saying to me, keep coming back. Keep coming back. So I want to open Mark chapter 9, verses 17 through 24. And it says, then one of the crowd answered and said, Teacher, I brought you my son who is a mute spirit. And wherever it seizes him, it throws him down. He foams at the mouth, gnashes his teeth, and becomes rigid. So I spoke to your disciples that they should cast it out, but they could not. He answered him and said, O faithless generation, how long shall I be with you? How long shall I bear with you? Bring him to me. Then they brought him to him, and when he saw him, immediately the spirit convulsed him. He fell on the ground and wallowed, foaming at the mouth. So he asked his father, how long has this been happening to him? And he said, from childhood. And often he has thrown him both into fire and into water to destroy him. But if you can do anything, have compassion on us and help us. Jesus said to him, if you can believe, all things are possible to him who believes. Immediately, the father of the child cried out and said with tears, Lord, I believe. Help me with my unbelief. The father is obviously hurt based on circumstances, watching his son suffer through this, right? So in his heart of hearts, he knows that God is God, but he is struggling because of a circumstance. How many of us have struggled with our belief in God based off of circumstances, right? I believe in you, God, because my parents told me about you and I read about you in the Bible and I've had this and this and this, but why did I lose children? Why did I lose custody of my kids? Why did I get diagnosed with hepatitis C? Matthew chapter 17, verse 20 says, So Jesus said to them, because of your unbelief, for assuredly I say to you that if you have faith as a mustard seed, you will say to this mountain, move from here to there, and it will move, and nothing will be impossible for you. So I can say that when I came to the program, that I had faith that was more than just a mustard seed. Has anyone seen a mustard seed? They are like very minuscule. I was going to bring one in, but you wouldn't have been able to see it anyway, so it wouldn't have made no sense. I would have just been up here, and you would have just thought I was clenching my fingers, being like, okay. And then you would have thought that I was trying to do that stupid thing where I'm like, haha, I made you look, and punch you in the shoulder. But I can say that I had more than that faith, right? And if I have just that faith, it says that I can move a mountain. And at that time, I wasn't even a good steward to the Lord, right? I just stopped using drugs, started doing the right thing for the right reason, and God started to move in my life. So I had been diagnosed with this thing called hepatitis C, and I had no clue what it was. Right? I just knew that it was an incurable disease. That's what I was told, that you're always going to have hepatitis C. It's incurable. We can do some treatments. Back then it was interferon, and there was some things talked about. But Hosea 4:6 says, my people are destroyed for their lack of knowledge, right? And this is where I could have destroyed myself, was because of some lack of knowledge, because I almost ran back to the very drugs that gave me hepatitis C in the first place, that tried to kill me because I was so upset that I had hepatitis C that I'm just going to go do the drugs again. Right? But God, He sent a power greater than myself to talk to me, restore me to sanity. They convinced me to do a follow-up, get a blood work done, and go talk to a doctor that there's some treatments that can be done. So I do this, I go do the blood work, and this is sometime later, and it's December 5th, 2012, and I walk in, and the doctor's looking at me, and I'm feeling, all scared because I don't know what's going to happen, but he says, don't sit down. So now I feel like I'm going to have to go somewhere else for special treatment. And he says, there's a very small percentage of the world that has had this happen, but your body has cured itself of hepatitis C. I said, you mean it's dormant? He said, no, it is gone. Right? I'm talking about when God moves a mountain in your life and takes that intangible stuff that you've been trying to focus on and you're trying to figure out, is God real? And He moves a miracle in your life. It's time to wake up. So here I was, blaming God for all of the wrong things that were going on in my life, and He does this miracle. Wake up, Craig. So in that moment, my life changed. Now, I was still broken. I was still facing 16 years in prison. I still didn't yet have custody of my kids. I was still living in an Oxford house. But God revealed Himself to me. Psalm 34, verses 18 through 22 says, the Lord is near to those who have a broken heart and saves such as have a contrite spirit. Many are the afflictions of the righteous, but the Lord delivers them out of all of them. He guards all His bones, not one of them is broken. Even shall slay the wicked, and those who hate the righteous shall be condemned. The Lord redeems the soul of His servants, and none of those who trust in Him shall be condemned. I began to trust in the Lord, and I started to pray in that moment. My prayers went from praying for me to praying for others. My prayers went from asking for things to giving thanks. My prayers changed, and as my prayers changed, my life changed. The second step is known as the hope step. It opens our eyes and allows us to see that help is available. We do not need to do this alone, but we must reach out and accept what God has to offer. All we need to do is believe that a power greater than ourselves is waiting to be our personal salvation. What comes next is beyond our wildest dreams. Lost dreams awaken and new possibilities arise. So I'm going to move into our surrender crosses, desire crosses. And if somebody here has maybe not surrendered yet to the fact that there is a power greater than you that can stop you from doing the insanity day in and day out, we want to invite you up. Now,